Hey guys, it's Dorr and Coach with Tactical Hyve. In today's video, we want to take a little trip down memory lane and talk about secondaries. Secondaries differentiate from pistols or sidearms just because of how important they are given the nature and danger level of the work. And so we kind of thought we'd start at the beginning and to bring you back up to the present and just kind of go over a little bit of the, what goes into, being a secondary versus just a standard sidearm.
Yeah, so a standard sidearm, if you think way back, World War II, your machine gunner would roll around with one of these because he couldn't have a heavy machine gun and an M1 Garand, right? And we had these bad boys since World War I all the way through to about 1985.
Yeah.
And this is the first thing, when we started in the early 80s, we were rolling with something like this for land warfare, but then as we branched into that CQB assaulter, what you guys know as an assaulter now. Back then it was like, okay, we're doing a close quarter battle. What the hell's that? Well, we were figuring that out. But this is the gun that we had. Now, if your main gun goes down, whatever you're carrying, for us it was an MP5 at the time, but if it failed for any reason, at that close range, you don't have time to fix your main gun. You need a secondary. So in that respect, it's just like a reserve parachute if you're skydiving. You don't skydive without a reserve parachute.
Exactly, or you're not supposed to. And yeah, that's really kind of the way we looked at it. And obviously this predates my existence on this planet, but from what I was taught and what I was told, conducting actual operations, going toe-to-toe in that two-way environment up close, I mean, you're basically in free fall. It is that dangerous. And it is your equipment, your ability to use it at a moment's notice that's going to keep you alive. So having purpose-built, kind of tricked out 1911s in, what we now take for granted for modern holsters, you don't want to have anything over the top of or blocking or impeding your ability to draw your secondary. Never.
Yeah. Everything was made out of nylon back then, and you had the cool little clipping with the snap on your thumb brake.
Yep.
That's what held this in. And some guys wore them on the belt. Some guys put them on their vest. We were just experimenting to figure what the hell.
Yeah, guys could pretty much do whatever they wanted, and that's not entirely gone the way of the dodo. As long as it makes sense, if it doesn't, there's always somebody ready to tell you.
You always got to try the new stuff, man. I mean, that's how we got to this one. So this is the, not the exact one that I carried at Team 5, but just like it. The improvements that were made were basically, you put better sights on, you polish the feed ramps, and just little things like that for reliability. But, honestly, that and an aftermarket magazine, and these things were as reliable as anything else. Of course, you only had, 8 rounds total.
+1, 7 on a Govy flush.
7 in 1. And the aftermarket ones, I think you could get like a 10-rounder, but it stuck out a little bit. And it just made you look cooler, so it was all right.
And the 1911 was, I would say, kind of the workhorse mainstay for that assaulter secondary role. Definitely in the 80s, going into the 90s, with big city, big budget law enforcement, that had those dedicated SWAT teams. Obviously, LA PD SWAT would be the most notable. They're all about the 1911, as well as in the military, you had the Army and Marines, SOP units that continued using the 1911. The Marines, I think, might still have them, at least on the Force Recon side. And then FBI HRT also, being the premier LE assaulters.
Yeah.
And the 1911 remained in service with most of those units, if not all of them, until at least the 2000s. And it was in the very early 2000s when we started deploying in force to the desert, be it in the mountains or the Arabian Peninsula, and there was definitely some issues with dust, rotor wash, etc. And that's kind of where it slowly met its demise. But it hung in there for almost 100 years.
Oh yeah.
Without any interruption. I mean, there were units that were created from day one and continued using these things for at least 2 decades.
Well, see, there's a couple things on that one. One of the reasons that happened is World War II, they stopped making, the government contract, they stopped making them at like $1.5 million, whatever, and they never reordered anymore. So there was $1.5 million of these bad boys sitting in a warehouse, so they just pulled out new ones, and I guess around 1985 is when they ran dry and then had to figure something else out. But yeah, it was a good solid gun until then, and I got nothing bad to say about that. But boy,
Neither do I. You know, I've got a few of them. I grew up with them. You know, I didn't shoot a ton growing up, but I was definitely, you know, learned on 1911s, and I love the way they point. I love the way they shoot. You know, but they are a single stack 45, so you know, a little less user friendly, and a lot less room for error.
yeah,
Because that capacity, you know, is king in a tick up close. You don't want to have to stop to reload, especially if you're down to your secondary and now you're reloading. Man, your team should be keyed in on the fact that you have a pistol out, because obviously the gun does sound and look a lot different than what you should be using. So they should be looking for a way to nudge you out of the way. You should be getting out of the way. But like we already covered in a previous video, once you start getting after it, it's hard to stop. You know, we did a video on the SAS takedown in the Iranian embassy siege. And there was a certain sergeant assaulter team leader named Tommy Palmer, and dude, there was no stopping him. Huh. And he actually had one of these.
Yeah, and that was Princess Kate. That was 1980, and I was watching. In fact, I carried this one for I think 2 platoons, and then I went out and got my own. So this, the idea of having 14 rounds of 9mm was more appealing than 8 rounds of 45 to me. Just having that extra capacity, and you know, the extra 2 mags that you're carrying, you got 16 with this one, and you got what, 28 with these, right? So,
well, it depends. I mean, way back in the day, you know, 7-round mags were more the norm, but
well, yeah,
but they could have had
7
some.
rounds,
They could have had some. I don't know. I don't.
It's been a while, guys. If I get my numbers off,
you know, I know they started coming out with those +1 mags and then the 10-rounders for the 1911, but still, it's a single stack world, big old fat bullet. They're heavy, you know, and when you're carrying this stuff for weeks, months at a time, with everything else you have to carry, I mean, honestly, like, weight matters. And just having higher capacity, smaller bullets, and that's just the way of the world. 5.56 is going nowhere. And 9mm has pretty much taken over for 45. But over across the pond, you know, in Europe, this thing was king for quite a while. You know, the SAS ran these for up until...
It was developed in 1935, so these were around for the Second World War.
Yeah, they certainly were, and they were fielded by both sides.
It's well proven.
Yeah, the first thing you did when you took over Belgium is you took over the FN factory and you started issuing these bad boys
Put little swastikas on them and call it even.
Went from Belgian to German to British/Belgian, and
they were making them in Canada, and
everybody was using them.
So good gun, and you know, back when I was at SEAL Team 5, nobody cared if you went out and bought your own sidearm. So I did, and so I was running this one for a couple of platoons, and you know, again, good gun. Nothing bad to say about this. When you're shooting ball ammo, there was guys out there going, okay, you want that bigger bullet for the 45. I don't know. Nowadays, maybe back then that mattered, but now with better bullet design, especially for civilians, because military pretty much we're stuck to ball most of the time, unless you're working certain special
I don't know how.
assignments.
I don't know how. I never asked, but you'd go on deployment and there would be 40 Mike ammo cans filled with pistol ammo that had the middle of it missing. And that was just the way it went. And then later on, as you know, we got into like the Title 10 stuff and things started to become relaxed. They just started shipping freaking federal law enforcement.
Well, the way it was put to me, because we had frangible ammo and hollow points, and if you were going out expecting to run into non-uniformed combatants,
that's weird. Who would ever expect that?
Illegal combatants, you could use that on them. Yeah. But if they were uniformed combatants, then the laws of the Geneva Convention or Hague or whoever the hell.
So the first 2 weeks of the Iraq invasion, you probably should have had them.
Yeah.
After that, you were good.
It was not like, you know, if you loaded up for one because you were expecting this one and somebody else showed up, there was no repercussion for that. But if you were planning on hitting a place with uniformed folks in it, you had to bring the military ball ammo.
As well you should.
So, anyhow.
And then,
but these days, civilians get to carry whatever they want, and bullet design has really come a long way. And 9mm, there's, 45 still holds a place in my heart. Always will. But 9mm with the proper bullet. Yeah, you just capacity and effectiveness. It can't be beat.
Yeah, and it's easier. It's easier to keep on target. For people that are either less trained or coming from behind the power curve, it's just an easier gun to get on target, keep on target, and you've got more rounds to work with.
Mhm.
And nobody's going back.
Well, the one drawback here that you had with both of these is that they're single action. So you had to carry it cocked and locked, ready to go. And there was some issues with safety. Even with trained guys, mistakes can happen. So that drove us to the double single was the next one.
It was. In fact, just a little bit more on that. What really screws people up is the fact that your hammers are cocked back, exposing, the back of your firing pin. So mud, blood, spit, ass, rotor wash, if that got into this crevice, your gun just wouldn't fire. And, going over the beach, working in muddy conditions, or, getting out of a helicopter on a dirt road.
Oh, dude, you're browned out every time.
And it would fill up that cavity. And there are documented cases of guys pulling out their pistols to use them and they didn't work. And that is what kind of led, what really started to get the strikers to take over. But before that, America,
well, for
our close
a hot
allies.
minute, we had Beretta 92s, but then they rolled through, and honestly, I think I deployed with them once and never really used them.
The Beretta M9 kind of became the status quo. We don't have one of those here because we have too many 226s to justify it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and just get one. But yeah, so now we were living with the 226. These things came online in the mid 80s, around the same time as the M9. They actually lost to Beretta for the M9 contract for like a couple of dollars or whatever it was. But these things now have a double to single, so you can go ahead and keep that hammer down, and that keeps all that grit, all that dirt out of that crucial part of the firearm where the hammer actually strikes the back of the firing pin. So these things actually became much, much more reliable. They did have that double to single. That's not a new technology. The Germans and Austrians over the Walther guys had that figured out on the Kraut side, but we went ahead, and this one's literally made in Germany.
This one is? Yeah, that one's a German one.
Yeah, this one's mine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this became our bread and butter for, 25 years?
Well,
Yeah.
I finished my career with it.
Yeah.
My active duty career was
30 years?
Was finished up with this one. I think I got my first one because we were still, Team 5 was still doing this. When they made the transition, I rolled out and I was doing other stuff. But when I showed up at Green Team in 1995, that was the first time I got one of these. And I had it all the way till 2010 when I retired.
Honestly, I think it was over 30 years. But
yeah, I mean, that's just my personal experience with it. But so with the Beretta, you had a safety that was up here, and basically it just decocked and then put the thing on safe. And for the 5 minutes that we had them, nobody ever did that. You would you basically use the safety as a decocker. So it was on safe, off safe, the hammer was down.
But it still had the potential to go on safe.
Yeah.
And that's not, and when you're transitioning from primary to secondary in the heat of the moment, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and that's just terrifying.
And it was not ergonomic the way it sat up there. It wasn't like a quick,
no.
These are made to be worked, so your thumb had it. But with that one, boy, you almost had to reach up with your support hand thumb. And by then, you already got holes in you because it's too late.
Yeah.
But with this one, they basically just got rid of the whole safety idea and just, the fact that you've got that first trigger squeeze is long and a bit heavier, just made sense. Okay, that was your safety at that point. Of course, once that sucker, every other squeeze after that is light and like single action. So it's sweet. And then when you're done, just reach up here with your decocker, push that bad boy down, decock, it's like you're on safe again. And then when you holster up, the other cool thing about this that the newer weapons don't have is if you put your thumb over that hammer, there's a mechanical advantage. So you cannot pull that trigger. So when you're putting the gun away, no matter if you bump into something, if this is going to prevent you from putting a hole in your leg.
Yep.
And there's more than a few cops rolling around with 9mm size holes in their leg because they put their Glock away.
Not just cops, there's a whole bunch of people. But it's the gun's fault.
Yeah.
It ain't my
Always
fault.
the gun's fault.
It's always,
Yeah.
And some people had, the complaints about, I don't like the double action. I know, I get it. You were raised on soy.
It's a training
It's fine.
thing. It's
Yeah.
just training.
It's actually very smooth. It's very easy to use. You just have to get used to it. It's called training. And I honestly, like, I miss this thing. I still have them, but I don't use them anymore. But man, shooting this thing was a dream. I think the SIG trigger was superior to the Beretta. But the Beretta's still a good gun. They get a lot of hate because they're kept in service far too long, but that's another story for another day. And yeah, there's no safety, mechanical safety of any kind on this thing. And that's on purpose. It's designed to save lives. Now, had this thing won the M9 contract, it would have had a safety on it. Because that's just the way that the big military goes.
Yeah.
And, maybe that saved some lives, but honestly, I know for a fact that it's also, it's cost us some lives. On more than one occasion, Americans were found with their fully loaded M9 still in their hand with the safety on.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to training, because in the heat of the moment, things are happening so fast, you're reacting instinctually. That's a word. And not having a strategery. Not having a safety on a secondary is crucial. Obviously, if I was going to rock a 1911, of course, you've got that safety right where it needs to be. But that's over 100-year-old technology. It is what it is.
And it's built to be worked, whereas the one on the 92 was not at all.
No. And this thing was awesome, though it did have its limitations.
It is heavy.
It is big. It is heavy. Not that ever bothered either one of us, but one thing that we noticed was, again, going back to what we were talking about with the exposed hammers on the 1911s, even with the hammer dropped forward to that double action pull, this thing had issues in the desert.
You can get enough gunk in there to
doing non-standard mobility out in the desert where you're just off-roading, you're getting in and out of helicopters and that type of environment. We did start to see a little bit of issue with these. They had to be cleaned regularly, even if they hadn't been fired. After one DA, we were driving, it already took us 2 hours to drive back from this thing. And for whatever reason, we stopped at the range. And we were just like,
let's give it a try.
We had to meet with somebody, or there was a reason to be there. We were just sitting around as the leadership was talking to them. So we're at the range. So we just started shooting our guns. And all the primary weapons worked, but some of the SIGs did not work very well, which led us to immediately adopting the next pistol on our list, which is the Glock 19. Now, this is a Gen 5 RMR cut. This is a little bit closer to what they're issuing now in that secondary role, though the Mark 27, as it's known.
Okay, yeah, because this is the Mark 25, right?
Yeah. It didn't officially replace the SIG. It replaced the 239 and the 228.
228, yeah.
It's supposed to be a concealable pistol. It has the ones that work have threaded barrels, and there are Gen 4s, but it's okay. This thing was pressed into service as a secondary, and unless you have ginormous hands, there's little to no complaints. But these things...
I got a complaint. My biggest complaint with this bad boy is, I know. Here it is. Okay. The way my hand fits on this, you put a magazine in there, and that magazine, every time you shoot, it just slaps the bottom of my finger right there. End of the day, I'll have a blood blister on my frickin' pinky. And it's just annoying, okay? Anyway, that's on the stock Glock. That's my biggest issue. I don't mind the Glock knuckle, and I don't mind railroad tracks occasionally, but man, just that slapping every time just sucks.
Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't go with a full-size frame. You want to go with the short...
Do you know why they didn't go for the full-size frame? Because they weren't replacing...
Exactly, yeah. Well, yeah, but why didn't they...
Why didn't they go with the bigger frame and the shorter...
Oh, those crazy guys and their prudent decision-making. That's okay. But anyway, As far as on the soft side, the Glock is actually the standard issue, and it's the 27. It is a 19. They've got those extended mags and other the mag well extenders and things like that guys mess around with. But all in all, this is what they're working with.
And if you're wearing gloves, your pinky doesn't get, mine doesn't get slapped.
Yeah.
But when you're training people.
Yeah, I'm able to get away with it usually, but then again, teach their own.
And the other biggest drawback was this one. Each one of these has the same grip pitch. It's from the 1911 all the way through. You're talking 18 degrees, and this one went to 22. So guys just have a tendency to shoot a little high.
Yeah,
and again, especially under stress.
Yeah, I was actually teaching this close quarter marksmanship program at Assaults when we switched from SIG to Glock, and I was really worried about it, but actually there were pretty much no issues. Guys were like, "Oh, okay, gun shoot good? All right, gun shoot different? Okay, cool, man, later."
Still shoot.
Yeah, the gun culture and the SEAL teams is, does it work? Yeah, it works. Okay, cool. That's about it. A little bit different in other units. Speaking of other units, in the conventional military, they've gone to the M17. This one's been modified because the standard one is left a little wanting.
The owner didn't like the manual safety, got in the way, so he removed it and then put a different grip module on there because you can with these.
Yeah, and I was drawn to these early on, once they got the bugs worked out, because it's really kind of like the best of both worlds between these two. And I've been using this one and then this one. And I started using the Glocks earlier than I needed to just because there were so many of them and I wanted to, learn how to use a different type of platform. But, this thing, is made by SIG and it's really kind of a halfway point. These things are a little controversial. People like to blame them for it just going off all on its own. I don't know. There's some crazy videos out there. But
we've never seen that. But
yeah, I've seen people pull the trigger at inopportune moments, unfortunately. But that's not the gun's fault.
No.
Anyway, this is kind of where we're at now. These are both being fielded mostly by the conventional side. The soft side has this one, but they also have access to this one. And this is what is filling that assaulter secondary role. If you're running an actual M17 or M18 with that mechanical safety, be warned. I can't tell you what to do if your particular unit micromanages, your safety configuration, but man, you got to train to it. You've got to be able to get that thing off instantaneously, instinctually, because, if you've ever seen an old school cartoon where the eyes come flying out of the head and they jump up, that basically happens more or less in your head. That's how terrifying it is. So,
all the tier 1 guys I know are running. If they have the 320, there's no manual safeties on anything because it's so modifiable. And tier 1 unit, you pretty much get to do it within reason what you want, and it's highly customizable. There's a lot of good stuff about them. If you're not worried about the thing going off on its own.
Yeah.
Which I'm not.
Nor is anybody else who has training and is in a professional unit. I've just never heard of anyone.
Trolls out there.
I've never heard of anybody having an issue.
Right, that's it. Put it in the comments, man.
Yeah.
Just I
like the Serpa holster. The Serpa holster is so bad. Dude, the Serpa holster is the holster of GWAT. I don't know.
But there's a lot of new guys that got a little, if you're a new shooter and you're activating your trigger finger, but with it goes back to training, guys.
Goes back to training, guys. Doesn't matter what platform you use. These are just a few examples. There's a whole bunch of them out there. There's a lot of good stuff out there. We're living in a marvelous, miraculous age of affordable, really awesome full to mid-size handguns that could fill that assaulter, that secondary role.
But they're all going to suck. They're all going to be dangerous if you don't train with them. And it's not sexy. You can't go, oh, look at this cool new thing I got from my... No, it's, performance. Get out there and show what you can do.
Yeah, and there's dry fire. There's plenty of cool dry fire methods out there. If you don't own dummy rounds for the platforms that you plan on using, God forbid, if need be for their intended purpose, pick up some dummy rounds. Work those ergonomics, get some holster work in, get some draws. You don't have to do live fire to accomplish quite a bit. Don't let anybody see you doing it.
And there's no Gucci gear that's going to make up for bad training.
No.
Or lack of training. because
Oh.
that's what most people do. They buy this cool thing, go, wow, look at this cool thing I got. And then, hell, don't buy the RMR. Take that $300 or whatever, buy ammo, buy a class, get trained, go to the range, get some reps in, good clean reps, and get better.
Yeah.
And then save your pennies for something.
But if you are going to buy that RMR, now you got to train with it.
Well, yeah, you still got to train with it as well.
Because it does change things, you know?
A little bit.
When we were first starting off with the RMRs several years ago, a Delta guy told me, because they obviously had red dots before anybody probably, and he's like, don't look for the red dot, look for the front sight, nothing changes. Just do exactly what you were doing before, and did. Just light switch, made all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, guys, you know, I just want to make a video, just kind of go down a little bit of memory lane and kind of talk a little bit about what makes a secondary. And, you know, tell us what you think in the comments. Maybe there's a different platform that you prefer. This is just what we saw during our careers and kind of what, from the beginning of, you know, trying to figure out how to deal with people that, you know, felt justified based on some book somebody wrote a million years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, that created an entire kind of tactical industry or whatever you want to call it within militaries and law enforcement. You know, the CQB assaulter was born, and the pistol that falls into that category isn't just a sidearm. It isn't just an issue, a duty weapon, man. It is a reserve parachute, and how you configure it and how you deploy it at a moment's notice really makes the difference. And again, it comes down to training and a gun that just works properly. All right. Thanks for being here. This is Dorr and Coach, Tactical Hyve, out.